Dr. In adjusted her 6 arms nervously as she stared at the readouts from her medical scanner. The scientist had examined over 300 different species in her career, from the silicon-based of 7 to the gaseous ethereals of the nebula colonies. She understood biology in ways that made her colleagues jealous and her enemies fearful. But the creature lying unconscious on her examination table every principle of evolutionary science she had ever learned. The human was young by their standards, perhaps 25 solar cycles old according to the preliminary data. He had been found drifting in an escape pod near the galactic trade route, barely alive after what appeared to be a catastrophic engine failure on his transport vessel. Standard protocol demanded that all unknown species be quarantined and studied before being allowed into civilized space. What should have been a routine examination had turned into the most confusing week of scientific career. She tapped her primary manipulator against the scanner display, hoping the readings would somehow change. They didn't. According to every instrument in her laboratory, this human should have died at least 6 times over during his journey through space. The levels of cosmic radiation his body had absorbed would have the organs of most known species. The temperature fluctuations in his pod should have caused his cellular structure to collapse. The oxygen deprivation alone should have resulted in irreversible brain death within minutes. Yet here he was, breathing steadily, his vital signs strong and consistent. Secondary eyes focused on the tissue sample she had extracted from the human's arm. Under magnification, the cells appeared almost primitive compared to the sophisticated bioengineering that most advanced species had developed. There were no apparent radiation shields, no backup organs, no redundant systems that would explain his survival. The DNA structure was remarkably simple, almost crude in its design. The laboratory door hissed open, and Commander Ra of the Galactic Medical Authority strode in on his 4 powerful legs. The officer was known throughout the sector for his no-nonsense approach to xenobiology and his complete lack of patience for mysteries. "Doctor In," he growled, his mandibles clicking with irritation. "I need your preliminary report on the alien. The council is breathing down my neck plates and they want answers." His main head swiveled toward him while her secondary head continued monitoring the human's vital signs. "Commander, I wish I could give you answers, but this creature is unlike anything in our databases. Its biology makes no sense according to current scientific understanding." Ra's compound eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The human's body temperature fluctuates constantly, sometimes by several degrees within a single rotation. This should cause cellular damage and metabolic chaos, but his systems appear to function normally. His heart is a simple 4-chambered pump that somehow manages to circulate fluid throughout his entire body without any mechanical assistance or redundant backup systems." The commander's antennae twitched with impatience. "Many primitive species have single-heart systems." "Yes, but not like this." Pulled up a holographic display of the human's circulatory system. "Look at these vessels. They're incredibly fragile, yet they carry pressurized fluid at velocities that should cause them to rupture. And here in the brain, the blood flow patterns suggest that this organ consumes nearly 20% of his total energy output. It's grossly inefficient." Ross studied the display with growing confusion. His own species had long ago evolved distributed neural networks that used less than 3% of their energy for cognitive function. Perhaps they compensate with enhanced processing power. "That's what I thought initially, but the neural scans show otherwise. The human brain has approximately 86 billion neurons, which sounds impressive until you realize that the crystallite collective mind contains over 4 trillion. Yet somehow, this human was piloting a faster-than-light vessel through one of the most dangerous sectors in the galaxy. The commander's mandibles clicked more rapidly now, a sign of deep thought among his species. What about their physical capabilities? Surely that explains their survival. Gestured toward another display showing the human's muscular and skeletal structure. "If anything, they seem even more fragile. Look at this bone density. Their skeleton contains only 206 individual bones, most of them hollow. Their muscle fibers show no evidence of the metallic reinforcement that most space-faring species develop. They have no natural armor plating, no toxin resistance, no ability to enter suspended animation during crisis situations." "Then how did he survive in that pod for nearly 2 weeks?" "I don't know." The admission was painful for to make. "By all rights, he should have died within hours. The pod's life support systems failed early in his journey. He was exposed to hard vacuum twice when micrometeorites punctured the hull. The internal temperature dropped below freezing for at least 3 days. Ra moved closer to examine the human directly. The creature looked so peaceful lying there, completely unaware of the confusion his mere existence was causing among the galaxy's top scientists. His skin was pale and smooth, unmarked by the radiation scarring that should have covered his body. His breathing was slow and regular, showing none of the respiratory distress that exposure to various atmospheric mixtures should have caused. "Have you attempted communication?" "He's been unconscious since we brought him aboard. His brain activity suggests deep sleep rather than coma, but every time I try to wake him using standard neural stimulation, his body simply adapts. The electrical impulses that should activate his consciousness are somehow absorbed and redistributed throughout his nervous system." The commander's 4 hands clenched into fists. "This makes no sense. Evolution doesn't work this way. Species don't develop space travel capabilities without first developing the biological resilience necessary to survive in harsh environments." Nodded emphatically. "Exactly. It's as if this species evolved in some kind of protected environment where they never faced serious existential threats. Yet somehow they've managed to develop technology advanced enough to traverse interstellar space." A soft chime from the monitoring equipment drew their attention back to the human. His vital signs were changing. Heart rate increasing, brain activity rising to what appeared to be consciousness levels. His eyes began to move rapidly beneath closed lids. "He's waking up," whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The human's eyes opened slowly, revealing startling blue irises that seemed to glow with an inner light. He blinked several times, his gaze moving around the laboratory before settling on Ra. For a moment, there was only silence as 3 very different forms of life studied each other across the vast gulf of evolution and understanding. Then the human spoke. "Where am I?" The words were transmitted through the universal translator, but there was something about the way he formed them, the controlled modulation of his voice, that suggested a level of cognitive sophistication that didn't match his primitive biology. Stepped forward cautiously. "You are aboard Medical Station Kappa 7. I am Dr. In. You were found in an escape pod and brought here for treatment." The human sat up slowly, his movements fluid and coordinated despite having been unconscious for over a week. "My ship. What happened to my ship?" "We found debris scattered across several thousand kilometers. Engine failure, most likely. You're fortunate to have survived." The human's expression grew somber. "The others?" "You were alone in the escape pod." He closed his eyes for a moment and was startled to see moisture forming at the corners. She had never seen a species that leaked fluids as an emotional response. It seemed wasteful and inefficient, yet somehow deeply moving. Commander Ra stepped forward, his official bearing evident in every gesture. "I am Commander Ra of the Galactic Medical Authority. We need to ask you some questions about your species and your—" The human wiped the moisture from his eyes and looked directly at the commander. "I understand. Though I have to say, you're not what I was expecting when I imagined first contact with alien life." His translator struggled with the concept of first contact, suggesting that this might indeed be the human's first encounter with non-human intelligence. The implications were staggering. A species that had achieved interstellar travel without any prior knowledge of galactic civilization. "What is your species called?" Ra asked. "We call ourselves humans. Our world is called Earth." "And how long has your species possessed space travel technology?" The human thought for a moment. "We've had rockets for about a century, true interstellar capability for maybe 50 years. We're still pretty new at this." 6 eyes widened in shock. Most species required at least 1,000 years of technological development before achieving reliable faster-than-light travel. The biological modifications necessary to survive in space typically took even longer to perfect. "How do you survive extended space travel without protective modifications?" she asked. The human looked confused. "Modifications? We just use life support systems and radiation shielding. Sometimes we take vitamin supplements for longer journeys." The casual way he said it made his head spin. Vitamin supplements, as if space travel was no more dangerous than taking a walk in a garden. "Your biology shows no evidence of artificial enhancement or evolutionary adaptation to space environments." Ra stated. Yet you survived nearly 2 weeks in a damaged escape pod under conditions that would kill most known species within hours. The human shrugged, another gesture that the translator had difficulty processing. Humans are pretty resilient, I suppose. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us in pretty much every way imaginable. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, natural disasters. Our ancestors had to be tough just to survive long enough to reproduce. Felt something click in her mind. A dangerous world. A species that had evolved under constant threat, developing not specialized adaptations for specific environments, but rather a general resilience that allowed them to survive almost anything. Tell me about she requested, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. The human smiled, an expression that involved pulling back his lips to reveal white calcium structures that realized were probably weapons of some kind. Earth is beautiful, but it's not exactly what you'd call a peaceful place. The weather can kill you, the animals can kill you, the plants can kill you. We've got hurricanes that can level cities, earthquakes that can split continents, volcanoes that can block out the sun for years. And your species simply adapted to this. We didn't have much choice. Adapt or die, you know. Our ancestors learned to be flexible, to think on their feet, to survive whatever the universe threw at them. I guess we've kept those traits. Commander Ra exchanged a meaningful look with. The implications were becoming clearer and also more disturbing. Here was a species that had evolved not specialized capabilities, but rather a generalized toughness that allowed them to survive in almost any environment. No wonder his biology seemed so primitive yet effective. How many of your species exist? Ra asked. About 8 billion on Earth, maybe another billion in our colonies and space stations. The numbers were staggering. Most advanced species had populations in the millions at most, carefully controlled to maintain genetic optimization and resource balance. 9 billion individuals suggested a breeding rate and survival capability that galactic norms. And you all possess these same survival characteristics. More or less, there's variation, of course, but yeah, humans are tough, we have to be. His mind was racing with possibilities. A species of 9 billion individuals, each possessing the kind of general resilience that allowed them to survive in the harshest environments without technological support. She was beginning to understand why this human's biology had seemed so confusing. He wasn't designed for any specific environment. He was designed to survive in all of them. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the station's communication system. Commander activated the display, revealing the concerned face of Admiral Oss of the Galactic Defense Force. Commander Ra, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple ships approaching the station. Configuration unknown, but they appear to be using a propulsion system we've never encountered before. The human on the examination table sat up. How many ships? Admiral Oss hesitated before answering. 17 vessels, approaching at significant velocity. They've been broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but we can't decode their transmissions. The human was already moving to get off the table. Those are my people. They've come looking for me. Felt a chill run through her nervous system. 17 ships. The humans had sent 17 ships to rescue one individual. The resource expenditure alone suggested either incredible wealth or complete disregard for economic efficiency. Commander, Admiral Oss continued, the approaching vessels show no response to our hail attempts, and they're armed, heavily armed. The human stopped moving and looked directly at the screen. Admiral, this is Captain of the Earth vessel Determination. I'm the one they're looking for. May I speak with them? Admiral O's expression showed the confusion that seemed to be the standard response to human contact. You're authorized to communicate, but I want our defense grid powered up and ready. Understood. Turned to, Doctor, thank you for saving my life. I'd like to return to my people now if that's acceptable. Found herself nodding, though her scientific mind screamed that she needed more time to study this fascinating creature. Of course, but perhaps you could answer one more question. Sure. Why did your people send so many ships for one individual? The resource expenditure seems excessive. Smiled again, that strange display of white calcium weapons that somehow conveyed warmth and humor. Doc, where I come from, we have a saying, no one gets left behind, ever. It doesn't matter if it's one person or 1,000. If one of our own is in trouble, we all come running. The simple statement hit like a physical blow. A species that valued individual life so highly that they would risk 17 ships and hundreds of crew members to save one person. Combined with their apparent biological resilience and their rapid technological advancement, the implications were staggering. As was escorted toward the docking bay to rejoin his people, found herself staring at the data from her examination. She had been thinking about human biology all wrong. She had been looking at their apparent weaknesses and wondering how they survived. But perhaps she should have been looking at their strengths and wondering what they might be capable of. A species that evolved under constant threat, developing not specialized adaptations but general resilience. A species that valued individual life above resource efficiency. A species of 9 billion individuals, each possessing the survival instincts necessary to thrive in the harshest environments. Commander Ra approached her as she stood lost in thought. "Doctor, what's your assessment?" Turned all 6 of her eyes toward him, her expression grave. "Commander, I think we may have just encountered the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "Dangerous? That human seemed perfectly peaceful." "That's what makes them dangerous. They don't look like a threat. They appear primitive, fragile, inefficient, but they're not. They're survivors on a level we've never encountered before, and if there are 9 billion more like him." She trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. But as reports came in of the human fleet's capabilities, of weapon systems that seemed crude but devastatingly effective, of ships that could apparently operate under conditions that would disable most galactic vessels, began to understand that humanity's introduction to galactic civilization was going to change everything. The humans didn't just puzzle the galaxy's understanding of biology. They threatened to rewrite the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic society was built. 3 months after the incident at Medical Station Kappa 7, the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with an undercurrent of anxiety that had not been felt in over 2 centuries. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered for an emergency session to discuss what had become known as the human question. Dr. In stood at the central podium, her research data projected in holographic splendor above the assembled delegates. The months following Captain's rescue had been a whirlwind of diplomatic contact, scientific exchange, and growing concern among galactic leadership. What had begun as routine first contact protocols had quickly escalated into something far more complex and troubling. "Honored delegates," began, her primary voice resonating clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "my team and I have now conducted extensive studies of human biology, psychology, and sociology. Our findings challenge every fundamental principle we thought we understood about the evolution of intelligent life." Ambassador of the Hegemony Coalition shifted uncomfortably in his crystalline seat. The leader had been one of the most vocal critics of humanity's rapid integration into galactic society. "Dr. In, surely you exaggerate. They are a young species, barely beyond their planetary origins. How much of a concern could they possibly represent?" Secondary head fixed on the ambassador, while her primary head continued addressing the assembly. "Ambassador, in the past 3 months, human settlements have been established on 17 worlds previously considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. They have colonized a planet with surface temperatures that regularly exceed 300 degrees Celsius. They have built mining operations on asteroids with radiation levels that would sterilize most known life forms. They have established research stations in the event horizon of a Class C black hole." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Representative Ra of the Avian Collective spread her magnificent feathers in a display of agitation. "That's impossible. The energy requirements alone for such protective technology would bankrupt most planetary economies." "That's just it," replied, her voice carrying a note of professional frustration. "They don't use protective technology, not in the way we understand it. They simply adapt." She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show comparative biological data. "Observe these scans taken from human colonists on 4, the volcanic world I mentioned. After only 6 weeks of exposure to the extreme conditions, their metabolism had adjusted to function efficiently in the high-temperature environment. Their blood chemistry altered to process different atmospheric compositions. Their cellular structure modified itself to resist radiation damage." Dr. K of the Bioengineering Institute floated closer to the display, his gaseous form shimmering with interest. You're suggesting they possess some form of rapid evolutionary adaptation. That's theoretically possible, but the energy costs would be enormous. That's where it gets truly fascinating, continued. These adaptations don't appear to cost them anything. If anything, adapted humans seem to function more efficiently than their baseline counterparts. It's as if their entire genetic structure is designed for continuous optimization rather than fixed specialization. Ambassador of the Trade Federation leaned forward on his forearms. Dr. In, you speak of adaptation, but what about their technology? Our engineers have been studying their ships and equipment. The designs are crude by our standards, yet somehow incredibly effective. Nodded enthusiastically. Precisely. Human technology doesn't rely on precision engineering or exotic materials. Instead, they build systems that can function under a wide variety of conditions and continue operating even when partially damaged. Their ships don't have the elegant efficiency of vessels or the sophisticated redundancy of designs. They have something entirely different: resilience. The display changed again, showing video footage from a recent incident in the Tau sector. A human cargo vessel had suffered catastrophic damage from a cosmic storm, yet had somehow limped to safety with systems that should have failed completely. The human vessel Endurance lost 70% of its hull plating, had complete failure of its primary navigation system, and suffered decompression in 4 different sections. Any of our ships would have been lost with all hands. The humans jury-rigged repairs using spare parts, sealed the hull breaches with what they called duct tape, and navigated by manual calculation for 3 weeks until they reached port. Senator of the United World stood abruptly, her serpentine form coiling with agitation. Dr. In, you paint a picture of a species that seems almost impossibly capable, yet you called this an emergency session. What exactly are you afraid of? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Took a moment to compose herself, knowing that her next words would likely define the galaxy's relationship with humanity for generations to come. Senator, the concern is not what humans are, but what they represent. For the past 50,000 years, galactic civilization has operated on certain fundamental assumptions. We assumed that advanced intelligence required specialized biological adaptation. We assumed that technology would follow predictable patterns of development. We assumed that space-faring species would need centuries or to develop the biological and cultural sophistication necessary for peaceful coexistence. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. Humans violate all of these assumptions. They achieved interstellar travel without genetic modification. They've developed technology that works through brute force effectiveness rather than elegant sophistication. And they've done it all in a time frame that shouldn't be possible. Admiral On of the Galactic Defense Force activated his speaking platform. Doctor, are you suggesting that humans represent a military threat? Not in the conventional sense, Admiral. Human military technology is actually quite primitive by our standards. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives, things we abandoned thousands of years ago. But they compensate for technological limitations with tactical innovation and operational flexibility that we're only beginning to understand. The display shifted to show tactical analysis from recent joint exercises. Observe this scenario. Human forces were given outdated equipment and asked to defend a position against a simulated attack by modern galactic forces. By all calculations, they should have been overwhelmed within minutes. Instead, they held the position for over 6 hours using tactics that violated every principle of modern warfare. How? Admiral On demanded. They cheated, replied simply. Not in the sense of breaking rules, but in the sense of completely ignoring established tactical doctrine. They used their equipment in ways it wasn't designed for. They employed psychological warfare techniques that confused and demoralized the simulated attackers. They adapted their strategy in real time as conditions changed. Captain Ra of the Defense Fleet had been studying the tactical data intensively. Dr. In, these human tactics are highly effective, but they're also incredibly dangerous. They seem to have no concept of acceptable losses or strategic withdrawal. That brings us to perhaps the most concerning aspect of human psychology, agreed. They possess what they call stubbornness, a tendency to continue fighting even when logic suggests surrender would be the optimal choice. Combined with their biological resilience and their technological adaptability, this creates a species that is extremely difficult to defeat through conventional means. Representative Ra ruffled her feathers again. Surely this is hyperbole. One species cannot be so dramatically different from all others. Gestured to her research team, who began distributing data tablets to the assembled delegates. I invite you to review the evidence yourself. In the past 3 months, we've documented over 200 instances of humans succeeding in situations where other species would have failed. They've survived equipment failures that should have been fatal. They've solved technical problems using methods that shouldn't work but do. They've established diplomatic relations with species we've been unable to communicate with for decades. Ambassador studied his data tablet with growing concern. Dr. In, this report suggests that humans have made contact with the Silence Keepers of the Void Nebula. That's impossible. The Silence Keepers have refused all contact for over 3 centuries. The humans didn't establish formal diplomatic contact, explained. They simply started talking to them. Apparently, the Silence Keepers were only silent because previous contact attempts were conducted according to galactic protocol, which they found offensive. The humans ignored protocol entirely and just started having conversations. Dr. K's gaseous form shimmered with what might have been amusement. You mean to tell us that a problem which has puzzled our best diplomats for centuries was solved by humans simply talking? That's exactly what I'm telling you, and it's emblematic of the larger issue we face. Humans don't approach problems the way we do. They don't follow established procedures or rely on proven methods. They try things that shouldn't work and somehow make them work anyway. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. Finally, Senator spoke again. Dr. In, what exactly are you recommending? Had been dreading this moment, but she knew her duty as a scientist was to present the facts regardless of their political implications. Honored delegates, I believe we need to fundamentally reconsider our approach to galactic civilization. The arrival of humanity suggests that our understanding of intelligence, technology, and social development may be far more limited than we realized. You're suggesting we change our entire governmental structure because of one species. Ambassador's voice carried clear skepticism. I'm suggesting that one species has demonstrated capabilities that challenge our basic assumptions about what's possible. Consider this. If humans can accomplish so much with such apparently primitive biology and technology, what does that say about the potential of other species? What if we've been limiting ourselves by adhering too rigidly to established patterns of development? Representative Ra of the Synthesis Collective, who had remained silent throughout the session, finally activated his speaking platform. The ancient AI's voice carried the weight of accumulated knowledge. Dr. In raises an interesting point. The Synthesis Collective has observed human development with great interest. Their rapid adaptation and unconventional problem-solving methods do indeed suggest that alternative approaches to civilization may be possible. Admiral On leaned forward intently. Representative Ra, are you saying that the collective supports integration with humanity despite the potential risks? The AI's response came after a long pause, suggesting deep computational analysis. The Synthesis Collective believes that humanity represents an opportunity rather than a threat. Their biological and psychological characteristics could provide solutions to problems that have stymied galactic civilization for. Doctor felt a surge of relief at the AI's support. Representative is correct. Human adaptability could be the key to solving some of our most persistent challenges. Climate degradation on failing worlds, resource extraction in hostile environments, communication with non-standard intelligence forms, these are all areas where human capabilities could benefit the entire galaxy. But Ambassador was not convinced. And what if we're wrong? What if this adaptability comes at a cost we don't yet understand? What if humans prove to be incompatible with galactic civilization? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Knew that some members of the Council were already discussing contingency plans, ways to limit human expansion if they proved to be disruptive to galactic stability. Ambassador, I understand your concerns, but I believe the greater risk lies in not embracing the opportunity that humanity represents. They've already proven that they can work within galactic society while maintaining their unique characteristics. Captain and his crew have collaborated effectively with our scientists and diplomats. Human colonies are trading peacefully with established worlds. Their technological innovations are being shared freely with other species. Senator coiled thoughtfully. Dr. In, you've presented compelling evidence of human capabilities, but capabilities and intentions are different things. How do we know that humans will continue to be cooperative as their population and influence grow? It was a fair question, one that had been grappling with since her first encounter with. Senator, human psychology includes strong social cooperation instincts. They have a concept they call fair play, a tendency to reciprocate positive treatment and to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Combined with their individual resilience, this suggests a species that will be valuable allies rather than problematic competitors. Captain Ra accessed additional tactical data on her tablet. Dr. In, I've been reviewing human military history. Their record shows extensive conflict among themselves. How do you reconcile this with your assessment of their cooperative nature? Had anticipated this question. Captain, human conflict patterns are actually evidence of their survival adaptability. They fight intensely when threatened, but they also form alliances quickly when faced with external challenges. Their history shows repeated instances of former enemies becoming close allies when circumstances change. The display shifted to show historical human military alliances. Observe these patterns. Nations that fought devastating wars have later become trading partners and military allies. The same psychological flexibility that makes them adaptable in hostile environments allows them to rapidly adjust their social relationships based on changing conditions. Representative Ra studied the data with visible fascination. This suggests that humans might actually be ideal members of a diverse galactic community. Their adaptability could help them work effectively with species that have very different social structures and communication methods. Exactly, agreed. We've been thinking about human integration as a challenge to overcome. Perhaps we should be thinking about it as an opportunity to enhance galactic civilization. The debate continued for several more hours, with delegates raising concerns about economic disruption, cultural contamination, and political instability. But gradually, a consensus began to emerge. The risks of human integration were significant, but the potential benefits were even greater. As the session drew to a close, Senator called for a preliminary vote on the establishment of a formal human integration protocol. The measure passed by a significant margin, though not without dissent from more conservative factions. Doctor watched the vote tallies with mixed emotions. She had successfully argued for human integration, but she knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Humanity's biological and psychological characteristics had already begun to influence galactic society in ways that no one fully understood. As delegates filed out of the chamber, Representative Ra approached the podium. Dr. In, the collective wishes to collaborate with your research team on long-term studies of human development patterns. Bowed respectfully. Representative, we would be honored to work with the collective, though I should warn you, studying humans has a tendency to challenge every assumption you thought you understood about intelligent life. The AI's response carried what might have been amusement. Dr. In, the collective has existed for over 50,000 years. We have learned that the most valuable discoveries come from having our assumptions challenged. As packed her research data and prepared to leave the chamber, she reflected on the irony of the situation. 3 months ago, she had thought she was conducting a routine medical examination. Now, she had become the architect of a new era in galactic civilization. The humans had not just puzzled the galaxy's understanding of biology. They had forced the entire galactic community to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about intelligence, technology, and society, and somehow suspected that this was only the beginning. 2 years had passed since the Galactic Council's historic vote to establish the Human Integration Protocol, and Dr. In found herself standing in what had once been considered the most dangerous region of known space. The Maelstrom Sector, a region of twisted spacetime and unpredictable gravitational anomalies, had been declared off-limits for over 1,000 years after claiming the lives of countless exploration vessels. Now it hosted the most successful multi-species research facility in galactic history. The station floating beside her transport was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human structural techniques had been combined with biotechnology, defensive systems, and crystallite computational networks. The result was a facility that could not only survive in the hostile environment of the Maelstrom, but actually use the chaotic energies to power revolutionary research into the fundamental nature of reality itself. Dr. The human scientist who had proposed the Maelstrom Research Initiative, greeted at the docking port with a smile that no longer seemed alien after 2 years of regular contact. "Dr. In, welcome to Station Breakthrough. I hope the journey wasn't too rough." Flexed her 6 arms, still slightly disoriented from the trip through folded space. "Doctor, I confess that traveling through the maelstrom still seems impossibly dangerous to me. How do you maintain such confidence in the safety protocols?" Laughed that strange vocalization that humans used to express amusement. "Honestly, we don't think of it as dangerous anymore. Challenging, yes. Complicated, definitely. But not dangerous. Once you understand how the gravitational fields interact with quantum fluctuations, navigation becomes just another engineering problem." As they walked through the station's corridors, was struck by how seamlessly different species were working together. A team of ethereal energy beings collaborated with human technicians to calibrate delicate instruments. Engineers consulted with avian mathematicians on structural calculations. The barriers between species that had existed for seemed to be dissolving with remarkable speed. "Doctor, I must admit that the success of this facility has surprised many in the galactic scientific community. When humans first proposed conducting research in the maelstrom, most of us considered it suicide." Nodded thoughtfully as she led toward the main laboratory complex. "I understand the skepticism. By galactic standards, we were asking to do something impossible. But that's kind of the point. Humans have never really accepted that things are impossible just because they're difficult or dangerous." They entered the central research bay, and its primary eyes widened in amazement. The space was enormous, filled with equipment that represented the pinnacle of achievement from dozens of different civilizations. But more impressive than the technology was the energy in the room. Scientists from every major species in the galaxy working together with an enthusiasm and efficiency that would have seemed impossible just years before. "The breakthrough came about 6 months ago," explained, gesturing toward a massive device at the center of the bay. "We were trying to map the quantum structure of the maelstrom's gravitational field when we realized that the chaos wasn't random at all. It was following patterns that only became visible when you stopped trying to predict them and started trying to adapt to them." Dr. Kelvin, a physicist whom knew by reputation, approached them with visible excitement. "Dr. In, perfect timing. We're about to initiate another phase mapping sequence. You'll want to see this." Watched as the massive device began to hum with energy. The readings on surrounding displays showed fluctuations that would have terrified most scientists, but the multi-species team monitored them with calm professionalism. "The key insight came from studying human neural patterns," Doctor explained. "Human brains don't process information linearly like most other species. Instead, they constantly adapt their processing methods based on the type of information being received. Doctor suggested we try designing our sensors to work the same way." The implications hit like a physical blow. "You're saying that human cognitive architecture provided the solution to understanding chaotic gravitational systems." "Not just chaotic gravitational systems," replied with evident satisfaction. "We've discovered that the same principles apply to quantum mechanics, biological evolution, social dynamics, even artistic expression. It turns out that adaptability isn't just useful for survival, it's fundamental to understanding how complex systems work." As if to demonstrate the point, the massive device suddenly shifted its configuration, mechanical components rearranging themselves in response to changing conditions in the maelstrom's gravitational field. The movement was fluid, almost organic, like watching a living creature adapt to its environment in real time. "This is impossible," whispered. "Technology doesn't work this way. Machines are designed for specific functions, not for autonomous adaptation." Doctor's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "That's what we all thought, but humans have been building machines that adapt and improve themselves for decades. They call it artificial intelligence, though we're beginning to understand that it's really artificial adaptability." Pulled up holographic displays showing the station's operational parameters. "Every system on this facility is constantly optimizing itself based on changing conditions. When a solar storm disrupts our power grid, the energy distribution network automatically reroutes power through alternative pathways. When gravitational fluctuations stress the hull, the structural supports redistribute load patterns to compensate." Studied the displays with growing wonder and concern. "Doctor, you're describing technology that learns and evolves independently. Doesn't this concern you? What if these systems develop beyond your ability to control them? The question hung in the air for a moment before responded. Dr. In, I think you're still thinking about this in terms of control versus chaos, but humans have learned that there's a third option, partnership. She gestured toward a nearby workstation where a human technician was apparently having a conversation with the station's computer system. The interaction looked more like collaboration than programming. Our AI systems aren't designed to be controlled or to be independent. They're designed to be partners. They have their own capabilities and limitations, just like any other member of the team. We work together to solve problems that none of us could handle alone. Doctor nodded enthusiastically. It's revolutionary. Instead of trying to build perfect systems that can handle any contingency, humans build imperfect systems that can adapt to contingencies they weren't designed for. The results are far more robust and capable than anything we've achieved with traditional engineering. As they toured the facility, was introduced to research projects that everything she thought she understood about the limitations of science and technology. Human-designed organisms that could survive in the vacuum of space were being used to study cosmic radiation effects. Self-modifying computer programs were solving mathematical problems that had puzzled galactic scholars for centuries. Hybrid technologies, combining biological and mechanical components, were achieving efficiency levels that pure technology couldn't match. But perhaps most impressive was the effect that human integration was having on other species. They had begun experimenting with technologies that could evolve and improve themselves. The military was developing adaptive tactics that could respond to unexpected threats in real time. Even the ancient crystallites were beginning to modify their collective consciousness to incorporate more flexible thinking patterns. Doctor said as they paused to observe a joint research team working on what appeared to be a prototype faster-than-light communication system. I need to ask a difficult question. Are humans deliberately trying to change galactic civilization? Consider the question carefully before responding. Doctor In, humans don't try to change things, we try to make things work better. If that means changing established methods, then we change them. If it means working within existing systems, then we work within them. The goal isn't change for its own sake, it's finding solutions that actually solve problems. But surely you must realize the impact you're having. Species that have remained unchanged are suddenly adopting human methods and technologies. Traditional power structures are being disrupted. Ancient certainties are being questioned. Nodded thoughtfully. We've noticed, yes, but from our perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Stagnation isn't stability, it's just another form of death. If galactic civilization has been static for thousands of years, maybe it needed some disruption. Doctor interjected with what sounded like agreement. Doctor In, the hegemony has existed in essentially the same form for over 10,000 years. In the past 2 years, we've made more scientific and technological progress than in the previous millennium combined. The human influence has been extraordinarily beneficial. But wasn't entirely convinced. Doctor, progress is valuable, but so is stability. What happens to species that can't adapt to these rapid changes? What happens to cultures that are fundamentally incompatible with human methods? The question was answered by an unexpected voice. Representative Ra of the Synthesis Collective materialized in the laboratory, his holographic form shimmering with computational activity. Doctor In, the collective has been monitoring this exact concern. Our analysis suggests that human influence doesn't eliminate other approaches to civilization. It expands the range of viable options. Looked pleased by the AI's arrival. Representative Ra, are you here for the phase mapping demonstration? Indeed, Doctor, but also to address Dr. In's concerns about cultural compatibility. The collective has observed that species exposed to human methods don't abandon their traditional approaches. Instead, they develop hybrid approaches that combine traditional strengths with human adaptability. The AI gestured, and holographic displays showed cultural and technological development patterns across various species over the past 2 years. Observe the avian collective. They have maintained their traditional emphasis on precision and elegance, but have incorporated human flexibility into their decision-making processes. The result is a culture that is both stable and adaptive. Studied the data with fascination. The avians are still fundamentally avian, but they've become more capable of responding to unexpected challenges. Precisely. Similarly, they have retained their hierarchical social structure while adopting human collaborative techniques for problem-solving. The ethereals have maintained their focus on energy manipulation while incorporating human approaches to physical engineering. Doctor's compound eyes gleamed with understanding. You're suggesting that human influence doesn't homogenize galactic civilization, it diversifies it. Correct. Humans provide a new set of tools and methods that other species can adapt to their own needs and characteristics. The result is not human civilization extended across the galaxy, but rather each species developing enhanced versions of their own civilizations. Smiled broadly. That's actually how we hoped it would work. Humans have always believed that diversity makes everyone stronger. We don't want everyone to become human, we want everyone to become the best version of themselves. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the station's communication system. Doctor activated the display, revealing the concerned face of Admiral Oss from Galactic Defense Command. Doctor, we have a situation. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown fleet approaching from outside the galactic rim. Configuration suggests a level of technology beyond anything in our databases. They're not responding to communication attempts. The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in. An unknown fleet with superior technology, approaching from the vast emptiness between galaxies. It was the kind of first contact scenario that every military planner dreaded. Stepped forward calmly. Admiral, do we have any indication of their intentions? Negative. They've made no hostile moves, but they're also showing no response to diplomatic overtures. Estimated arrival at the outer colonies is 72 hours. Representative Ra's form flickered with increased computational activity. Admiral, the collective recommends immediate activation of the multi-species crisis response protocol. This situation requires the full capabilities of our integrated civilizations. Doctor felt a chill run through her nervous system. The multi-species crisis response protocol had been developed as part of the Human Integration Agreement, but it had never been tested under actual emergency conditions. Was already moving toward a communication console. Admiral, I'm requesting permission to coordinate the scientific response. If these beings have technology beyond our understanding, we'll need every available resource to establish meaningful contact. Granted, Doctor, you have full authority to mobilize any scientific assets you deem necessary. As began issuing orders to research teams throughout the galaxy, realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented. Instead of panic or confusion, the multi-species response was characterized by calm efficiency and coordinated action. Human adaptability was being combined with biological expertise, military precision, crystallite computational power, and the accumulated wisdom of dozens of other civilizations. Within hours, analysis teams were studying the long-range sensor data, xenobiology specialists were preparing for potential biological hazards, and diplomatic corps from every major species were developing communication strategies. The response was comprehensive, flexible, and faster than anything that could have been achieved under the old galactic governmental structure. Doctor approached as they watched the coordinated response unfold. Doctor In, do you still believe that human integration represents a threat to galactic stability? Consider the question as she watched coordinate with species that had been bitter enemies just decades earlier. Doctor, I'm beginning to think that the question is irrelevant. Human integration isn't something that can be stopped or reversed. It's already happened. The galaxy has already changed. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Looked around the laboratory, watching ethereal energy beings collaborate with engineers, while human scientists worked alongside ancient AI consciousnesses to solve problems that none of them could handle alone. Doctor, I think it's simply a necessary thing. The universe is vast and full of challenges that no single species can handle alone. If the galaxy is going to survive and thrive in such an environment, it needs the kind of adaptability and cooperation that humans have brought to galactic civilization. As reports continued to flow in from the coordinated response effort, found herself thinking about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been studying an apparently primitive species that her understanding of evolutionary development. Now, She was watching that same species help reshape galactic civilization into something stronger, more flexible, and more capable than it had ever been before. The humans had not just puzzled the galaxy's understanding of biology. They had demonstrated that the galaxy's understanding of civilization itself had been far too limited. And as the unknown fleet continued its approach from the vast emptiness between stars, realized that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society might be their simple belief that impossible challenges were just problems that hadn't been solved yet. The universe was about to test that belief in ways that no one could predict, but for the first time in her career felt confident that galactic civilization was ready for whatever came next. They had learned to adapt. They had learned to work together. They had learned to embrace the impossible. They had learned to be human,